So first and foremost, thank you, Una, for the opportunity. But I will say, forgive me for thinking I can stand up here in front of you guys and give a talk. So I'd rather give you the opportunity to meditate with me on something during this Holy Pascha. So I'd like to start with kind of how this all came about. So my father loved the stories of lesser-known people in the Bible. It is why he and my mother named me Thomas, right? So Thomas was a doubter, and he firmly believed that that is the same in terms of us. We are doubters, and we always question. So that is my namesake. Likewise, I found myself liking the same types of stories and doing the same thing, and that's why many of you know my son is named Matthias, of course, because I've always cherished that story, and I hope he does the same. So my father, his favorite two saints were Thomas and Dismas. Does anyone know the story of Dismas or Dimas? If not, that's part of what we will be talking today. So wanted to title this Vignettes of the Via Dolarosa. Does anyone know what Dolarosa means? No? Maybe? Pain, yeah, so it's the road of sorrows. So just little snippets of a couple characters on that path to the Dolarosa, or the path of sorrows, and things that we can meditate on. Things that I meditate on, and things that I find profound. And these are only a sample. Through that pathway, there's many characters that we can focus on, and I think many characters that we do tend to focus on. But again, I like to kind of focus on a little bit some of the lesser ones. So I wanted to start with Malchus. Malchus is named in the readings. So with Malchus, he is one of the servants of the high priest. And the story goes, as we will read, as you'll find later on. So this is found, we start at the 9th hour of Good Friday Eve. We speak of Malchus, which is the servant that Peter strikes with the sword, and he cuts off his ear. So in some of the passages here, we'll read, "And suddenly one of those who were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew his sword, struck the servant of the high priest, and cut off his ear." That's in Matthew. In Luke, "And one of them struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear." Later on, he writes, "He touched his ear and healed him." And then Mark as well, "And one of those who stood by drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest." And then John, who then names both the aggressor as well as the individual. So he says, "Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus." Now, I want to pause first and focus on Peter, which is not lesser known. Of course, we know Peter very well. But it's interesting to note that someone like Peter, who spent countless hours with our Lord in this time, reacted in a worldly manner. The countless and thousands maybe of hours he spent with the Lord and learning his teachings and seeing his miracles, yet in this time, as he does later, he falls into a worldly reaction. And oftentimes we do the same thing. I mean, we come closer and closer and closer to God, and we read, etc., but still, as clean, quote unquote, we may try to be, we'll still fall into those worldly ways. Yesterday, in terms of Joe, he was talking about cleaning our room, right? And the idea of, even if there's a cleaning lady or a cleaning person coming, we don't just hands off. We try and do as much as we can. And this is indicative of that, right? Trying to, even as close as we can get, trying to be closer and closer. Now, forgive me, I'm a visual learner, so I tried to use some images from the Passion as well. So with Malchus, his ear is cut off. And to me, it's a marvelous thing, something that I've always found so fascinating. Every Pascha reading this passage is because, for all intents and purposes, as we see in the writings, it's one of the last few miracles that we see Jesus do. And when I think of Malchus and I think of this miracle where he's coming to aggress and capture and arrest Jesus, then all of a sudden he's attacked, so that's a hard day. But then he's healed and he's left speechless and he's left confused. Now, with research and with the gospel, not much is known of what happens to Malchus afterwards. But I'd like to kind of assume that while he had this miracle done to him, I would imagine he's with his group to arrest Jesus, that he probably followed and continued his night, quote unquote, normally. But from then, what happens? I'd like to think that Malchus would then have found the disciples and maybe been a follower of Christ. You know, you can't have a miracle like this and then not follow Christ. But again, I asked you at the beginning to meditate with me. How often have we been blessed? How often have we been touched? How often have we been healed? How often have we been given gifts and just carry on that normal? We just carry on as if nothing ever happened. And again, we marvel at something like this where, you know, he's been healed and it's this huge miracle, but we have miracles every day. I mean, I'm standing, breathing, talking. That in of itself is a miracle, but we don't take those things to heart. And again, later on, or in the image of the movie, he's standing marveling. Another character that we find his name through passed down history and passed down through generations. His name is Cassius Longinus. Cassius Longinus is the centurion who is charged with his battalion to go and crucify Jesus. So he serves under Pontius Pilate, and when Jesus is marching, going to Golgotha, he is in charge of that battalion to take him to Golgotha. And I'll read some of the passages here. And in terms of these stories, we read these. He's introduced this week in Pascha at the 11th hour of Good Friday in all four gospel recordings. From Matthew, so when the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and the things that had happened, they feared greatly, saying, "Truly, this was the Son of God." In Mark, so when the centurion who stood opposite him saw that, he cried out like this and breathed his last. He said, "Truly, this man was the Son of God." In Luke, so when the centurion saw what had happened, he glorified God, saying, "Certainly this was a righteous man." And John, but one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and immediately blood and water came out. Again, how marvelous. This person tasked to go and crucify Jesus, to pierce his side, and to have blood and water splatter on his face. And he saw this, he saw the occurrences of that time, he saw the eclipse, and he exclaimed, he prophesied, or he testified, I should say, "Truly this was the Son of God." So Cassius Longinus is actually a saint in our right, and he is acknowledged. We have him on the 23rd of Abib is his commemoration, and then in Hatur 5, there is a following story of where he was buried and where he was found. So again, someone who is tasked to go and persecute, tasked to crucify the Lord, and he was changed for the better. The Synaxarium, it says that he went to go learn from Peter, and he abandoned his service, and he returned to Cappadocia, where he is from, and he preached there. And because of his actions, he was executed for these deeds, and he became a martyr. Same thing here, to meditate with me. How many times do we go to spear the Lord, if you will? How many times do we sin? And again, I'm speaking of myself first. How many times do we sin and go against the Lord and go to crucify per se? But then when we are given the opportunity to go against the world for him, do we take that opportunity? Again, I'm speaking of myself. Someone who abandoned his service and went and followed the Lord. Something that, again, has always marveled to me. Personally, just a side tangent, one of my favorite depictions here in the sense of those that were surrounding Christ at the final hours were just few and then these Roman soldiers, again, that believed and testified. Moving on to Dimas or Dismas. Again, one of my father's favorite saints, which in turn turns into one of my favorite saints. And again, maybe not lesser known, because of course we have the hymn that we sing, and we know him by name, but I want to focus on something else. He has a first-hand encounter with Christ that, again, is very rare. I mean, it's the last conversation Christ has with anyone before his crucifixion, before he dies. And Jesus exclaims to him that today you are in paradise. And again, it's such a marvelous thing that I always meditate on, of how fascinating this person can be. And I'll read here a couple parts that we have. Again, in Luke is the main testament. We are introduced to Dismas, of course, in the 6th hour of Good Friday. But the other answering rebuked him, saying, "Do you not even fear God, seeing you are under the same condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we receive the due reward of our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said to Jesus, "Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And again, during the hymn that we sing, the line that really, truly strikes my heart is, "What did you see, and what did you observe?" And in the second verse again, "You did not see him glorified on Mount Tabor, in the glories and miracles, none of that stuff." And I personally joke and say that he was a thief until the end, and he stole paradise, right, is what we say. But again, beyond this, I want to meditate on something that I don't know we generally ever talk about. I want to focus on his suffering. He has this conversation with Christ, and he professes that he believes, and he says that, "Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom." So he's following Christ, and he ensured his salvation, and Christ says, "Today you will be with me in salvation." Did Christ end his suffering? No. Christ did not end his suffering. He suffered for another 3 hours, hanging there on the cross. His suffering did not end. But something very specific happens, or is happening. Christ was with him the whole time. Christ was with him through that suffering. And again, as my father would say, in terms of Thomas as a doubter and we are doubters, I feel the same. I don't know. I feel less deserving of paradise than the thief. Crucified on the cross, suffering, praising Lord, and I'm upset that I don't get a job interview, or I fight with someone, or I'm at rock bottom. So, something to, again, meditating for myself, but something that's always fascinated me of, do we picture ourselves hanging there next to Christ? Do we profess and testify and proclaim his glory in the worst of the worst? Moving on to the next person, I'll ask you, does anyone know who this is? No? Does anyone know who that is? Okay, good, perfect. These are Roman prefects, and they served Judea. And the person who served in between them was Pontius Pilate. Admittedly, I actually set out to do this talk specifically about Pontius Pilate because he, of many of the characters during the Passion, fascinates me the most. But there's a reason I am pointing out Valerius, Gratus, and Marcellus, is that these Judean prefects are inconsequential in many of the things they did. They were placed in Judea to govern and don't really have any amazing aspects. But with Pontius Pilate, he is, I'll say, noted because of Christ. Even to the point of, we recite his name in our creed, the very basis of our faith, every day or countless times a day whenever we recite that creed. Why? That in of itself has value, and there's a reason that's important. So I will read here when Pontius Pilate is first introduced. This is the first hour of Good Friday, and this goes through the third hour of Good Friday again. So he's introduced, they bound Jesus and led him away and delivered him to Pilate. And in Luke, then the whole multitude then arose and led him to Pilate. And they began to accuse him, saying, "We found this fellow perverting the nation and forbidding to pay taxes to Caesar, saying that he himself is Christ, a king." And in John, they led Jesus from Caiaphas to the praetorium. Outside of the events of Jesus, again, Pilate's legacy is inconclusive, and there's lots of debate as to where he stands in history. Yet he's so pivotal to us for a specific reason, for two main reasons. First, it roots our creed, it roots our faith in world history. To go into any Roman history book or to go into any history events in general, Pilate's name is there. He's there. Whether the world tries to erase him or remove any of his credibility, it is undeniable that he stands in history. So that roots our creed in real world history. Beyond that, there is something else completely. So we'll read here. From John. Then Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. This is later, after he was flogged. And Pilate said to them, "Behold the man." That in of itself is very, very fundamental to Scripture. That John would identify that Pontius Pilate is saying, "Behold the man." This highlights the gravity in Pilate's word, a historical or worldly man, entrenching that Jesus was a man, a human, who was crucified under him. There is a painting called Ecce Homo, which is "Behold the Man," which shows this action of Pontius Pilate showing the world, showing Judea, and showing all the people the man. Again, this human that was crucified. Beyond that, what I find most fascinating is the reservation that Pilate has and the one-on-one conversation that he has with Jesus. Every year, reading it, I'm always marveled again at how someone could have such a profound, intimate conversation with the Lord and then take certain actions. In John again, then Pilate entered the praetorium again, called Jesus, and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered him, "Are you speaking for yourself about this, or did others tell you this concerning me?" Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew? Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight so that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now my kingdom is not from here." Pilate therefore said to him, "Are you a king then?" Jesus answered, "You say rightly that I am a king. For this cause I was born, and for this cause I have come into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice." Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" Again, fascinating that not only does Pontius Pilate not give in to the masses at this time and not believe them at face value and say, "Okay, I'm going to crucify this so-called king and keep you at bay." He takes Jesus to the praetorium and has a sense of, maybe for lack of a better word, respect to have a conversation with him and to learn about him and to have a conversation with him. But regardless of this, the conversation ends with him being, many theologians say, sarcastic, and he says, "What is truth?" Though, as it's noted here, this is John chapter 18. If we rewind back 4 chapters? Jesus answered, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Pontius Pilate comes so close, right? He's inquiring, he's curious, but maybe for a selfish reason. Later, he speaks to Jesus again. So this is after he's sent to flog him. And he says, so again, the Jews and the multitudes are saying that he is making himself the Son of God. So in the praetorium, he says, where are you from? But Jesus gave him no answer, because there is no answer. And then Pilate said to him, are you not speaking to me? Do you not know that I have power to crucify you and power to release you? Jesus answered, you could have no power at all against me unless it had been given to you from above. Therefore, the one who delivered me to you has the greater sin. From then on, Pilate sought to release him. That line, Pilate sought to release him. I like to believe, again, this is maybe a meditation of myself, I like to believe at this moment, Pontius Pilate knew. He knew in his heart of hearts, and he, again, maybe believed, maybe did not. That story in of itself is inconclusive. He ultimately had one of the most intimate moments with Christ, and he did nothing with it. He had a very profound one-on-one, intellectual one-on-one, learned so much, and again, at this point, I believe he believed. He believed, but he did nothing with it, and he did not affect his life. And in the end, he gives in to the masses, and he crucifies him. Again, a meditation of myself, and if you will, with me. I like to think of this as lukewarmness manifest. Again, yesterday, Joe was talking about lukewarmness and in the gospel passage where Christ says he will vomit us, right? I like to think this is that example. The times where we come into contact with Christ and we learn of Christ and we learn the gospel and we're in church and we're confessing and all these things. But when it comes time to truly stand, we don't do anything with it. We move forward. What I write here and what I meditate, may we not lose ourselves to the lukewarmness, so that we are neither found in the world, where no one knows anything about Pontius Pilate. Some very small churches consider him a saint. Many others don't. No one knows how he died, where he went, what he did. So he's lost to the world. And then at the same time, he's lost to Christ in this situation. Again, these are just a couple examples that personally I found profound and I meditated on in terms of characters in the Via Dolarosa. There are others, of course, Simon the Cyrenian, Joseph of Arimathea, and others. But I wanted to close with this image. And I don't know if anyone knows the story of the movie and the director. This shot is the director's hand holding the nail, and later on there's a shot of the director's hand on the hammer nailing the nails in. And when the director was asked why that was the case, he exclaimed that in remembering the crucifixion and remembering the passion, we ought to remember ourselves as the one who crucified Christ. And again, it goes back to Thomas being a doubter, or Dismas being a thief, or Malchus coming to arrest him, or Longinus coming to, take him to be crucified. There's really no difference to ourselves and the day-to-days that we serve. Again, I'm speaking of myself. I'll say myself and how I see myself sometimes. And I think of this image and think of holding the hammer, and I think of holding the nail, and we often forget to self-reflect, and we often forget to remember that during the Pascha. So again, I just wanted to share that meditation with you guys. Thank you again.
That was a beautiful meditation. Thank you. So any questions, any comments? Beautiful meditation. Thank you.
Thank you. Bless you. we pray the nighttime litanies together. We ask and entreat you, Lord, the God, the Father, the Bandukuratur, and the